Bismillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. This is going to be a quick summary of AMJA's recommendations as of the end of January 2021 on the COVID-19 vaccines. As some of you may know, AMJA is the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. They are a body of experts on Islamic law that serve to better inform the Muslims as to the Islamic positions on newly emerging events, contemporary issues that we as Muslim minorities in particular are challenged by in non-Muslim majority contexts. And so the methodology of AMJA is that it usually consults the experts whenever that is applicable to better understand the context on the ground to best apply the Islamic principles to those actual realities. And so with the COVID-19 vaccines, for example, they would be consulting the virologists, the immunologists, the pulmonologists, the lung doctors, the infectious disease specialists, the pharmacologists. And based on that, they issued this statement. At the beginning, they reminded in the preface as to where this discussion comes from and the way in which they arrived at these recommendations, which were, in a nutshell, encouraging and endorsing and validating the importance of availing ourselves these FDA-approved vaccines. Pfizer and Moderna, in particular, at the moment, are the two that have been authorized. So these fundamental maxims in Islamic law, first and foremost, is the preservation of life. That is one of the higher objectives of the Sharia. The five major objectives of Islamic law are the preservation of religion, life, intellect, wealth, and honor or family or lineage. And so the preservation of life was given such importance, for example, in Islamic law, that eating a carcass, an animal that just died on the side of the road, for example, wasn't properly slaughtered, was allowed for the sake of preserving life when there was no alternatives. Uttering a word of disbelief was permitted in Islamic law when a person's life was on the line, and that was the only way to save their lives. They are encouraged to do this or permitted to do this. So that's the first principle. The second is availing oneself Allah's concessions. Many people may have misplaced guilt about, taking the cop out or the easier route. It is not just that Allah permits ease and concessions and hardship. We are told that Allah loves it when His servant accepts the concessions He extends to them. As a matter of fact, not just does Allah love it, meaning it is, a good thing and it is commendable. At times, it is even mandatory when not taking the concession can result in such great harm or cause a person to miss out on something even more mandatory or something so important. So availing Allah's concession is something Allah loves, and it you can fluctuate between being recommended and between being mandatory. The third principle is the concept of ingredients in trivial amounts. Are they consequential? And these are all principles that are universal in Islamic law, agreed upon, or nearly so. Ashadhu la hukma lahu, something that's just so rare, so insignificant in its amount, such as a substance, usually will not have much legal bearing, will not have much of a consequence in terms of the laws so many times. And when we're speaking about, the microscopic elements within vaccines, this is very relevant. The fourth is the importance of acting on greater likelihood. Our deen validates the necessity to not paralyze ourselves in life, to not stagnate until certainty arrives. So many times being absolutely certain is just unattainable in our world. So in the absence of certainty, acting on what is most likely, greater likelihood, is the way that you engage reality that does not have certainty so many times, right? The cement concrete certainties are actually much less than we would like them to be, and that is part of the exam of life, if you will. And then the fifth principle, very quickly, is that whenever there's competing elements, right, benefits and harms, risks and gains, maximizing benefit and minimizing harm, not locking oneself in some idealistic thought, some utopian fantasy, is the way to be pragmatic and beneficial to yourself, your well-being, and the world around you. So these were, in a nutshell, the five they prefaced the declaration with. And then they spoke about some concerns people may have regarding where these vaccines come from. The first of them was the discussion on these vaccines coming from a place of production from within fetal tissue. And first and foremost, off the bat, this does not apply to the authorized vaccines to date, right? Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, this is not even a discussion. They were not produced in anything, related to fetal tissue. This may stand true for the AstraZeneca vaccine, um, but once again, that is not available yet anyway. Pfizer and Moderna are. The second point of information that has to be stated here is that it was not quite in fetal tissue. Yes, the vaccine that is in the pipeline was sourced from a fetus of an abortion decades ago in the 70s, uh, but it is not uh, produced in that really. It is produced in a cell line, which is a laboratory mechanism. It's a little bit different, or not exactly as what some may assume. And then we say, let us assume, just for the sake of it, that it was produced in fetal tissue. Even if it were, this would be permitted by most scholars, because most contemporary scholars, and juristic assemblies of Islamic law, they accept the notion that human organs and human cells can be used. Of course, they have regulators, like we're not going to abort a pregnancy to use it, and we're not going to use it against the will of the parents, and we're not going to use the organ of a person that would die, and it would be upon his death that we can make use of his organ when there's a need for it. But in principle, the majority of scholars accept this. There's nothing wrong with this usage of human organ and human cell, let alone when there is such a demand warranting it. The next point of contention is that it's produced in porcine tissue, right? Coming from pork. And so, first of all, there's no confirmed reports about this, but we should still allow ourselves to learn, make it a learning moment, and to benefit from the fact that even if it were, let's just talk about this in the hypothetical. Let us say it was cultivated inside porcine cells. That would be the usual way that it would happen if it were using porcine tissue. And so if that were the case, we need to realize that the cellular parts of the pork don't wind up in the vaccine. It is made within the porcine cell, usually within the cell of whatever, right? And then it is removed. And so we're talking about two factors here that really simplify things for us, that we're talking about trivial amounts, microscopic elements, and that have come in contact with pork, but they are not pork. And proximity, being close to something, coming in contact with something impure, najis, is very different than something that is actually najis itself. That makes a big difference, according to so many of mainstream Islamic scholars, Islamic jurists, schools of Islamic law and interpretation. So that is the issue. It should really be easily excused in the mind of the jurist who understands these principles, considering the damage and the risk and the ongoing toll of this worldwide pandemic. So it's a trivial amount within proximity of najasa, not even najasa. And so it's not as problematic as we may think. The second way porcine tissue may be used is that it actually is used now, right? Where like the pork cells, the porcine cells, are directed through, mRNA to produce proteins that look like viruses out of this originally pork cell, so that the body thinks the virus, and then it creates the antibodies for it, and then your person gets the immunity. That is a possibility, another hypothetical. And they said if that unlikely occurrence happens, or likely occurrence happens, irrespective, in the case of necessity and insufficient alternatives, scholars, the vast majority of them, permit the use of impure, not something in the proximity of the impure, something impure, for medical treatment when there are no alternatives or no sufficient alternatives. And the only exception they make is wine. The other impurities or substances that are considered najis, they don't exempt them from the realm of usability in the cases of need. And so that would be the way to understand why this wouldn't be problematic, inshallah ta'ala. The last point that needs to be discussed here is the risk-benefit ratio, but it's so risky to take the vaccine, we don't know that it's actually safe. And upon consulting the experts, they said, the Pfizer vaccine, for example, this does not have the company's approval. This has the Federal Drug Administration's approval, which is an independent body that is recognized and does not work in a vacuum. Like, it does not work behind closed doors, right? The, it showed us how neither of them have had side effects when they went through the trials. Pfizer, had a trial with 40,000 people in it. 20,000 of them received the vaccine, and there was no serious side effects whatsoever, no red flags. And on top of that, it is not like they short circuited or prematurely said there's no side effects or serious side effects. The period of usual side effects was awaited for both Pfizer and Moderna. There was no cutting corners in that either. The fact that we can produce vaccines when the whole world is collaborating on it, after we've benefited so much from the past 15 years of trying to produce other vaccines, is why the vaccine came about as fast as it did. But the testing period for the approval was the same, according to what the information they received from the experts. And also, it is important to mention that there are legal frameworks in place to ensure that the data continues to come in. So it wasn't just, the 30-day wait period for serious side effects. To date, there's 25 to 30 million that have received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, and it is an ongoing observation that there are no serious side effects. But they're not. That doesn't say there cannot be rare complications or that another vaccine cannot have serious side effects. When we get to that bridge, we can cross it, and we're assuming that there would be one, and that it would get approved, which is not the case, and a very far hypothetical at the moment. And in general, considering the systems put in place, and then we want to consider, when side effects happen, what are the risks of non-vaccination? Like, think of the people that have died in the United States alone, coming close to 500,000 people now. The people that have gotten sick and long-term effects of this. What about, the financial devastation of so many people around the world economically? These have costs, long-term costs. And so, are they less or more than these side effects? Based on that, they arrived at the recommendation. They are encouraging everyone to avail themselves these vaccines that have been proven effective and proven safe. And our trust and reliance is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately, who is the creator of every means. We are simply reaching for the fruit that He placed in front of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the khair of these modern medical interventions and protect us from every evil. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on those that have succumbed to this virus, and accept them among the martyrs, and expand for them their graves and illuminate their graves for them. May Allah raise their ranks and forgive their sins, and may Allah cure all those that are sick and all those that have suffered, and provide for and sustain and alleviate all those struggling financially and all of those struggling emotionally and grieving. May Allah rid this world of the pandemic and not make us the last and the least to benefit from it, and not fall. May He protect us from falling back into heedlessness after it. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal, who has shown us through this pandemic His power, to show us and allow us to experience and taste now His mercy. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallah khairan, everybody. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.